What's up, my chess friends, and welcome back. I know it's been a while since I taught chess, but it's the winter holidays. I'm back, and today I want to start a new series with you where I'm going to be walking you through some tactical exercises that I find very interesting and instructive. And my hope is that by going through these exercises with you and sharing my thought process, I can help you improve your tactical vision, help you think and calculate more clearly, and also approach chess positions with the mindset of playing aggressively and fearlessly in response to your opponent's threats. So if that's something that's interesting to you, you're in the right place. And so without further ado, strap in, get excited. Let's get to work.
Shut up and sit down.
Okay, here we are. So this position is white to move. Um, White was Wilhelm Steinitz, black was Augustus Mongredian, and this was played in London, 1863. I will mention that Wilhelm Steinitz is an amazing player, first world chess champion, true genius of his craft. So I'm excited to get into this position with you. Before we start, I would recommend that you take some time to think about the position on your own and pause the video. Okay, I'm gonna assume that you've taken some time to think about this position. So let's begin. So the first thing I like to do, step number one, is I like to understand the material imbalances in this position. The first thing I see is that black has one, two, three, four, five, six pawns. White has one, two, three, four, five, six pawns. White has two bishops, black has two bishops, white has two knights, black has two rooks, queen, and king. Cool. Okay, so this just tells me that black and white have the same material, or even with material, that doesn't mean the position is equal, just means that the material imbalance is equal. Okay, step number two, this is what I like to call getting the Cliff Notes version of the position. And this is basically just getting a summary of the key features of the game, what's going on in this position, what is important to register and remember. So the first thing that I see right off the bat is this bishop on c4. Yeah. I mean, just look at this diagonal, right? Like this bishop is staring down this king, and this pawn on f7 is pinned, so it's essentially paralyzed, and so it isn't actually defending this knight on g6. This bishop's also attacking the pawn on f7, which is something that might be useful later on. Combined with the bishop is the knight on g5, also attacking this pawn on f7. So now I'm thinking that maybe this pawn might be a potential vulnerability to exploit later. Now, in addition to that, I see that this rook on d1 is basically giving this queen the death stare. Like this is just a nice X-ray attack. I mean, if this knight were to move, this rook would directly be attacking the queen. And so that's also something that might come in useful later. Now, I also noticed that this knight is not only attacking the pawn on f7, but it's also attacking the pawn on h7, which is also another weakness to be aware of. The pawn on h7 is defended by the knight on f6, which is not only defending h7, but also defending h5, which is a critical square. Because if I were to gain access to h5, my queen could suddenly come into h5 and start to infiltrate the black king side and put pressure. Now, combined with the queen moving to h5 is also going to be this rook on h1, which has this nice open h-file and is directly applying pressure to h7. So a lot of white's forces look like they're barreling down the king side, ready to attack. There's also one key piece here, which I think should also be considered, and that's the bishop on e3. Now, at first glance, it doesn't look like it's doing much to attack the black king because the knight sort of blocking it in from gaining access to the king side. But if this knight were to move, this bishop would have full reign and start to move on to h6 and start to attack critical squares in black's king side and weaken the dark squares. Okay, so that's a pretty good synopsis for white. In terms of black's bishop on b7, knight on f6, both are attacking the pawn on e4, which is defended by the knight. Okay, black has a threat. Apart from that, I don't see too much that black has that could be concerning. I mean, sure, black's knight has potential f4 ideas, but apart from that, I think black doesn't have many threats. Black's pieces are well grounded. Knight on f6, the bishop on g7, all protecting black's kingside. So that's also something important to note when I'm starting the attack. Now, as I mentioned before, we want to play with the mindset of aggressive chess, right? Even though black has this threat against e4, we should be concerned with our own threats and playing decisively to try to gain the advantage. Okay, so that brings me to step number 3. Now that we have a good synopsis of the position, what are our candidate moves? And so the first thing, as I mentioned, is this bishop on c4. Automatically, I'm thinking sacrifice, right? Like bishop takes f7, knight takes f7 maybe, trying to weaken up the king side. Is there something here? Now, apart from that, I also noticed that this knight is attacking the pawn on h7. Now, remember how I said that black's knight is very critical in this position because it's defending the h7 square and the h5 square. So if I could somehow remove the knight on f6 or distract it from the h5 square, right, white's attack could be significantly enhanced. And the move that seems to be doing this is knight takes h7, because if I were to force black's knight to h5, I have ideas of moving my queen to h5 and even potentially sacrificing my rook on h7 to try to get rid of that knight. So that's another candidate move that I'm considering in the back of my head. And so I have no idea whether these moves are going to work, but that's where step 4 comes into play. Now we begin calculating to see if there's anything that is actually possible with these moves. Okay, so let's start with bishop takes f7, first candidate move. Now, if rook takes f7, okay, knight takes f7, king takes f7, we're drawing the king out. The king looks a little vulnerable in this position. And now, remember we had this nice looking rook on d1 threatening the queen? Well, maybe I can play knight f3 here, attacking e5, threatening the queen as well. But I don't think this is too worrisome for black because black can simply just play queen e7, defending e5. And even if white does manage to play knight g5 check, black's king will escape to e8. And I do think white is better in this position, right? Don't get me wrong, h7 is about to fall. White still has very active pieces, but I think we can do better. And so let's revisit the position. Okay, the other candidate move that we were talking about was knight takes h7, right? And look at this knight. Now, it's not only is it breaking down black's king side, undermining the entire pawn structure, this bishop is also activated. So I'm also enhancing the piece play of my other attacking forces. So black, I think for simplicity's sake, is going to say, all right, thank you. I'll take the knight. Now, if black takes the knight, got to play aggressive. Sacrifice. Rook takes h7. First move that comes to mind. Let's get rid of the knight. Let's start to bring our forces into the game. King takes h7 seems natural. Queen to h5 check. The natural follow-up. Again, checking, attacking the king. King moves back to g8. And now, rook to h1. Right? White is ready to move in, is already threatening checkmate, by the way, on h7. And so black might be a little scared. So black is thinking, okay, I need to escape. What do I do? Rook t8 comes to mind, creating this nice escape square for the black king to move to f8. White says, all right, you met that threat, but guess what? Boom, queen takes g6. Because now, remember how I was talking about this bishop on c4, creating this nice pin? That is the same pin we're taking advantage of because this pawn is effectively paralyzed. It can't even take the queen on g6. So now white's queen has just won a free knight, and now white's queen is ready to invade. And so black needs to find a way to defend. And I think the best way for black to do that is to play queen to f6. Black's thinking, okay, I'm going to defend f7. I'm going to be attacking this queen. I'm going to try to get rid of your queen, which is the most attacking piece in this position, and hopefully neutralize this attack. But white says, nope, bishop takes f7 check, right? Now we're protecting the queen and we're forking the king and the rook all at the same time. Black needs to do something. Obvious response seems queen takes f7. But after queen takes f7, white says, check. Rook h8 check. Beautiful here. I think if black plays Well, first of all, if black plays bishop takes h8, that's not even possible because the queen is pinning the bishop to the king. And now if black plays king takes h8, queen takes f7. Free queen. Thank you very much. Black's position is in shambles. The white queen is attacking the bishop. White's bishop is ready to like swoop in with bishop h6 later on sometime. White's knight is going to be coming into the attack with knight f3, knight g5. It's over. White has a very tremendous position, and I think white has a decisive advantage. Let's go back a little bit. So in this position, I think aside from playing rook takes h7, as I just mentioned, we can also play queen to h5 here, right? I think this is also something to consider. I think it's also a solid move because it's the same idea now. We're attacking the knight on h7, threatening mate, but if knight f6, queen takes g6. Again, look at how valuable this bishop is. I mean, this bishop is just doing wonders for white's position right now with that pin. And now queen takes on g6, free piece. White's doing well here. Black might want to follow up with a little bit of a trick, play bishop d5, trying to neutralize this pin, allowing for pawn takes g6. But I think white can play something very simple like queen g3. And if bishop takes c4, knight takes c4, white still enjoys very reasonable play here, very active pieces, as you can see. And I think white also has a decisive advantage in this position. e5 is going to fall, not to mention bishop h6 is coming up next. So I think in this position, if we were to go back, I think queen to h5 is a reasonable move here. Very good move here. I think rook takes h7 is also a very good move here. Me personally, I like to play aggressive. I think sacrificing and blowing apart black's king side is the best way forward. And so rook takes h7 seems to be the better move here. But that's my personal taste. So that was the position. Hopefully you learned something from engaging in this tactical exercise. And if you enjoyed it, you learned something, please be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you so much, and I will see you soon.